Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Franchisor Success with our awesome Frank coach, Dan Olsen. How are you doing, Dan?
Well, I've been excited for this particular topic that you're doing. So I'm excited to talk with you today, as I always am, and I appreciate your questions that bring out hopefully what our listeners want to hear. So thank you.
That's right. So most people, after talking about how the process of a franchise is and all the different steps, the one that had the most interest was the call that you're gonna do with the franchisors, because I feel like it's a little bit scary for people out there just to be like, "Hey, McDonald's, can I talk to your main guy?" so, so how do we go about the main first call that we do with a franchisor? How do you schedule those things?
Yeah, in fact, many of those franchisors like that won't even take your call or even your application. Uh, so it or even like something that's come up more recently is built into $1 billion company like Orange Theory Fitness, and some of those places are just there's no more room for franchisees, so they're not taking your calls. I remember, I was over in Italy a couple of years ago, and I ran into this really cool concept called Amarino, and it was just like a little coffee type place, but they also had amazing Italian hot chocolate. I love
Oh.
that. And if you've ever had Italian hot chocolate, it is amazing. And then of course they have all these little pastries and cookies and things like that. It's just a cool little place, and the atmosphere is wonderful. So I thought, wow, I want to see what this is like. So when I got home, I looked up the name Amarino, and I thought one of the best places I could put this would be like in Park City, Utah, because that's one of the big star places of Utah. People love to visit that, and they've got some money, and they would be spending money on higher end beverages and pastries and desserts like that. So I put my application in. I'm as qualified as anybody out there. I put my application in. Not application, but I just typed in that I'd like to talk to somebody. And after maybe a week or so, I got an email back said, well, we're not quite ready for that yet for you. Even though they had locations in Dallas and other cities,
Oh, wow.
they wouldn't even talk to me. So sometimes you'll get that. But the franchises that are really on top of things, they will respond back to you quickly and things like that. So most of the initial appointments that you set up for that initial call, it will be done some research on your part. And there's usually two major ways for you to get there to that first call. First of all, maybe you're online doing some research and you're clicking here and you're going to there's a stretching franchise over here. That looks kind of cool. Simple, easy. All I'm doing is having my people stretch people. That might be a simple one. So you click on that, and sure enough, someone gets back to you and send you a little bit more information. You can analyze that, and then they want to set up that appointment with you. So that's the first way, is doing some research, usually online these days, or sometimes you might pick up a print magazine and you're calling and set up an appointment that way. Or the other way is through what's called a franchise broker or business broker. These are people who represent particular franchise companies, and they're there to help you and guide you through the process. And you don't pay them any fees for them to do that. They're paid by the franchisor. So there's no money that you have to pay them, but they're usually a good resource to figure out what the next step is. If you go through a franchise broker, usually they'll take you through a lot of the program of the franchise and let you see what it's all about. They'll answer some of your questions and get you prepared very, very well for those calls. And that's what a lot of my team members do, is we prepare people for those initial calls. So and our service costs nothing, and we can help you and support you. So if it's possible, I recommend going through a franchise broker, whether it's through our team or some of the other very valuable and good people out there who are helping others to find that right franchise. And then you have that kind of coach behind with a franchise broker. You also have that coach behind the scenes. So when you do have that first call, you can get back with them and they can, hey, how'd it go? Well, here's how it went. Then they can coach you on the answers that you need to give. That's what my team does, but there's also wonderful people out there that do that job very, very well to help you find the right thing. But let's say you came in online and you didn't have that coach. So I'm going to be your coach today, if that's okay, on what to look for in that first session. So you'll want to do your homework. as much as you can online about that particular franchise company. You'll look them up and you'll see what they have. But if they're younger, you're probably not going to find a lot about them. So don't let that disappoint you, though, because you don't find a whole lot, because you'll be able to find as much as you need to make a good decision as you get into the system. It's just sometimes there's just not a lot out there online about it. But usually they always have a website. You can go there and you can look at videos and you can look and see how things, the process works. So you're prepared when that call comes time. So, and hopefully maybe you even had a chance to go to a sales funnel and actually watch some videos about it. So, and if you're enthused about it and you want to take that next step, you click on it and you set the time, and then a franchise advisor will get on the phone with you, and now you're prepared for that first meeting. And like you said, sometimes it can be a little bit nervousness, especially if I remember the first time I had that meeting.
Oh, tell us about it.
I was living in Colorado Springs. I was working for the bank at that time, and I was tired of the corporate life. I still had to work a few more years to do that. And, but I was young. I was a branch manager, at the age of, I think, 24 years old or something like that. Maybe it was 25. And I had a good team behind me who had a good running branch. I was feeling good about it, but I wanted to be in my business the worst way. And so this little, location popped up along, I remember it was on Academy Boulevard in Colorado Springs. If anybody's been in Colorado Springs, you'll remember that boulevard. It's one of the major ones, and a lot of retail space there. And it was, I think the name of it was called, anyway, I'll just say it was a printing franchise. And that was pretty big back in the late 80s when I was into this. That dates me, but that's okay. People say that the silver hair is, people will actually maybe even listen to me once in a while because I do have that experience in silver hair. So anyway, I saw that and I walked in. I didn't have a way to get online or anything because this is the late 80s. So I walked in and they said, yeah, franchises are available. And I actually got a brochure, and I took it home and I read it, and I called the number and said, hey, I'd like to get some information. I left a message. And so they sent me out a package back then.
Oh.
Now it's all digital. Click here, click here. So they sent me out this little package, and it had an application in it. Remember, it was 4-page application, and I had to fill out what my background was, and I had to fill out list my assets and my liabilities and what my net worth was at age 24 or 25. Just getting started. So I filled all that out, and then I had to send it back in the mail before they'd even talk to me. So I sent it back in the mail, and so he calls and set up an appointment to talk. And so as we start talking, he says, hey, this is good and everything. It looks like you're excited about what we have here, and we're growing like crazy, and here's all this. And he says, but you know what? It doesn't look like your qualification. You'll be able to qualify. You don't have the net worth to do it. I thought, oh, well, okay. I thought you guys will help me with financing and things like that, but I still wasn't quite qualified enough to get to that. So I remember that was my first call, and I was pretty nervous about it because I didn't know, but and then it was kind of a down call because I wasn't qualified for that, but at least I tried. And that's the important thing. Don't worry if you're going to make mistakes. Don't worry if you're not qualified. If you're interested in something, go through the process. And worst case scenario is they'll say, well, come back in a little bit, you're not quite qualified. But best case scenario, even if you know you don't have the investment capital, there may be a way for you to do that through friends, family, other investors, people who believe in you that will want to get behind you and help with that initial franchise fee. So if you're really interested in a franchise like that, don't let that qualification process scare you in that first phone call, because there's ways to get through that, and there's ways to get the financing, there's ways to make it happen if that's something you're really interested in. How would it have been to be one of the first ones to be with like an Orange Theory Fitness? We'll bring that up example. You can't buy one now in the United States. It's all reserved for existing franchisees who are already in the system, but you have to be in the club now to be able to buy anything. Oh, wow. Same thing with a lot of the other big ones out there, whether it's McDonald's or whatever. It's hard to find an opening. They reserve those for people who are already in the club, sort of say, I guess we'll call it. So how would it have been to be in one of those? So don't give up. Even if you're not quite qualified just yet, you can. And if you see something that's an emerging franchise that has the potential to be something huge, again, it's all worth it to go through that process. But that call is usually an eye opener. And what you're dealing with when you're dealing with someone on that call is these people usually know what they're doing. They've been around. They're advisors. They can help advise you on the next steps. So the next call you have with another franchisor is even better because you've got good advice from the previous ones that you've talked to.
That's right. And even if you are going through the process and let's say that you're not qualified, you at least tried it and you have the experience on how that phone call went. So maybe that was not the right franchise. Maybe you get to find another franchise that
Right.
resonates better with you, but you already have at least the training on what this call was about. So going back to that phone call, like what are some of the questions that we should be expecting on that phone call?
Okay, so they're going to ask you typically, because like I said, you've had a chance to really check them out a little bit online and see what they're all about. Otherwise, if you didn't have the interest, you wouldn't be taking the call. So then it comes to their term. If they're doing their job right, they will be asking you the questions now.
Oh.
And so they'll ask you about, and so you'll need to be prepared to give your answers. And usually they're just very easy, straightforward. There's no wrong answer. Is tell us about your background and tell us about, do you have any experience with this in this industry? And sometimes that's good. Sometimes you don't need any experience. I mean, how many people, for example, wake up in the morning and say, hey, I'm going to go buy a massage clinic franchise, or I'm going to go buy a hair salon spa franchise. Most people don't think about that until they actually get some information on it. Once you get the information, then you can make some more intelligent choices and understand it so that when you get on that call, you already know a little bit more about it. And they will ask you those questions about how much you know about that. So hopefully you've done your homework on their particular franchise and or the industry that you're checking out. But the two biggest questions, perhaps the three biggest questions that I like to hear when I'm interviewing someone is, how would you fund this business if you were to move forward with it? We need to know where their capital is coming from. So you need to be prepared to answer that question. Well, I have this 401k plan over here. I've got 80,000 in there, and I can take that out, and that can be part of my down payment. And then I've got this HELOC over here that I can pull another 20,000 out. Or, I've even had this happen, and only under certain circumstances would we allow people to really use a lot of debt for their down payment. We don't like people to get in a lot of debt if possible. But sometimes we've seen them take 4 credit cards and pull the balances off of those and use that at the high interest. Yeah, I know.
Oh my goodness.
But that's only under special and certain circumstances. So if we hear that, we like, okay, maybe that's not the best, but we'll continue down the road and see if we can help them. So where are you going to get the funds? You got to have that answer before you even go in there, because they'll ask you that. And then number 2 is the question, do you need to draw a salary or take money out of the business now? Or in other words, how long can you wait before you start taking money out of the business? We like to see people who have the ability to already have a little bit of cash flow coming in where they're not desperate for cash flow, because typically you're not going to be wanting to take money out of your new business you just started out next month. You want to let it build a little bit and get some reserves in there. And so usually 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 months, 12 months down the road, you just need to be prepared for that. And then the other big question is, and this will tell you whether or not you can even move forward or not. They'll ask you the question, where would you, if you were approved for this franchise, where would you like to set up your first location? What are your top 3 areas? And so if you're sitting in any city, Dallas, for example, or Dallas, Fort Worth, you might be, I'd like to go to Grapevine, or no, I want to go more over to Arlington, or no, I want to go over to Frisco. So you might name off your top 3 places that you want to go into, and they'll tell you whether they're available or not. So you may have to adjust your plans a little bit. But if you're the first one to the table in those areas, that's kind of a good feeling. You want to get those places reserved so you know that you have your spot available. So location is going to be a lot. So those are right off the top of my head, those are probably three of the most important questions to be prepared for, to have answers for. And if they don't have a location available at all in your city, then that might shut down the conversation right then and there, and you don't have to waste your time any further, nor neither do they.
Gotcha. And during that phone call, do they also allow some questions coming from the future franchisee?
Yes. So if you're looking at a franchise, absolutely. Usually you might get one or two of those questions out of the way first, like, hey, do you have this area available? Or this is where my funding is coming from. Or I noticed there was a lawsuit up against this company, which franchise companies have all the
They
time.
all happen.
It happens. It's just part of the game, and they have to be disclosed in the franchise disclosure document. So you may, if there's something's troubling you about that, you may get that out of the way quickly. But that's not a red flag. That's not a game changer. If you go through the process and it still feels good, and the numbers are there, and the other franchisees are making money, and it's all working, that's just one person that may have caused a little bit of difficulty. So certainly you want to get your questions out of the way, maybe a couple of them first, then let them ask their questions. And then the remaining part of it will be usually them presenting and you asking your questions during that first call.
That's right. And I would say that one of the recommendations during that phone call is just be ready to be overwhelmed, because probably they're going to disclose quite a bit of information.
Yes.
And for someone that hasn't been doing anything in franchises, if this is your first franchise, just be ready. There's going to be a lot of information. But the awesome thing is that we have our super awesome coach, Dan, and his team, and they are more than happy to help you with all of those many pieces of information that we are going to be receiving during the first call. So I know that you also were a master franchisor back in the days. How was like your first phone call with a franchisee, a future candidate?
So as a potential master franchisee, now we're
Mhm.
talking about, so that's a little bit different story. And that's been our specialty over the years, is dealing with those a little bit higher level investor, and they've usually had a little bit more experience. So the things we look for with a master franchisee, we have to get into a little bit more detail, because these people become partners with that franchisor because they're owning the territory. So when you you acquire a master franchise, you're owning like a piece of real estate. It could be the state of Colorado, or it could be the state of Louisiana, or it could be Tampa, St. Pete in Florida. It could be a whole master franchise territory. So when you qualify for that, that franchisor is granting you the rights to be their partner and take on that piece of real estate, so that anything that comes through that real estate with their brand, you're getting a portion of, whether it's royalties, or whether it's maybe some cases it might be wholesale distribution income, or other things that go through, or franchise fee sales, or even setting up your own franchise. So you've got that opportunity. But here's what we look for. With a single unit, we look for someone who is good with people, can deal well with people. That's an essential piece of it. Number two, we look for someone that has the ability and desire to follow a proven system. Why do you get into franchise if you're not willing to follow that system? Go start your own business. The system is already there. But most people, this fits very, very well because they're used to that system. Number three, we look for someone with that good positive attitude, someone who's going to lift the franchise company instead of tearing it down all the time. So we look for that, and we test for that. And number four, we look for the proper financial qualifications, and that's different for every franchise, and that's for a single unit or master. But here's the difference with a master franchise. When I talk to a franchise candidate, there's a fifth thing that we really look for, and that is some pretty extensive business experience, or at least the willing to jump in and learn and use the experience they've had, because we like to have people who have maybe been around a little bit and had some experience in business, so they can take that experience, learn the new franchise system, and create something amazing, because they've already had the experience combined with the new system that they're learning. And now they're able to go out and help build an amazing territory within that master franchise program.
That's amazing. And yeah, I feel like with a franchise, just the fact that you already have a system that truly changes everything.
Mhm.
So for all the people out there that are listening to us and are a little bit scared about that scary first call with a franchisor, I would say just be ready to understand that there's a lot of processes out there for that specific branch, but you're gonna learn them
Yeah,
later on.
one thing on that, Marjorie, I want to mention before we finish is that most of the people that have come in that are clicking on internet sites or whatever, and we talk to, most of them don't get franchising. They don't understand it. But you know what? Once they understand it, it's the most amazing vehicle to get you to the spot where you can get that freedom that you've always looked for. And maybe you're not ready for it today, but never give up. I mean, when in my 80s, I'm not in my 80s, but in the 1980s, when I first started looking at franchising and other businesses, I wasn't qualified, but I stuck in there. And then I ended up being qualified not too many years after that, and was able to start getting into my own franchise. But don't let it scare you, like you said. It's not that big a thing. Once you understand it, it's an amazing vehicle that produces $2.3 trillion in sales.
Wow.
So it's something that's huge. But like I say, most of the people I talk to that are fresh, just looking into businesses, don't get it. And they've heard maybe some bad stories about it. And there are some stories about it. That's why you have to be careful. That's why you want to use a coach to get you through that.
And that's why we have you, our franchise coach. Thank you so much again, Dan. And thank you to all our listeners today. And we are super excited for our next topic. And we are going to be talking about a different type of franchises, which is the B2B. Thank you so much.
Ooh, I love it. Thank you.